Hello, and in this video we're going to download and install SQL Server Developer Edition 2022 along with SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS. I'm Philip Burton of idodata.com. So first of all, you need to go to a web page where you can download it. So here you can see I'm on a Microsoft web page. In the past, I've said Google the phrase download SQL Server 2022. However, at the time of recording, that takes me to some pages which are completely different to this. This is the best page to use. Now you can see that there are three big entries at the top here. I don't want any of those. Instead, I want to scroll down and choose a free specialized edition. Now, in this case, we're going to download the Developer Edition. So I'm going to click Download Now, and it downloads what is called a Bootstrap. So this is a small program, only about 4 megabytes. So I'll go to my downloads and open it. So do I want to allow this app to make changes to your device? Yes, I do. Now you can see that there are three options. A basic version where you don't have to do any of the configuration because it is the standard default configuration. A custom one where you can actually choose what you want to do, and you can download the media and then run them either on your current machine or on any other machine. So the basic one is fine to start off with. It will allow you to create select statements and do some database administration, but not much else. So if you wanted to do more in SQL Server, such as SSAS, SQL Server Analysis Services, SSIS, Integration Services, and SSRS, Reporting Services, then don't select this basic option. So custom might be the one for you. You can download it and choose what you want to install, or you can download the media and install them later on a machine of your choice. So I'm going to use the custom install type. So select a media location. So this is where it's going to store the download. So you can change it there and click install. So you can see now it is acquiring the setup files, but it is over a gigabyte. So it's going to take quite a while. So while it's downloading, I want to talk about some other things. So let's go back to this web page. So if I scroll back up, we start off with SQL Server on Azure. Microsoft Azure is Microsoft in the cloud, so you can get an SQL Server database in the cloud. So in other words, the back engine, which is the thing that I'm downloading at the moment, it runs in the background and you can query that from your computer. Now you can have that on your computer, the back engine, or you can have it in the cloud. So why not just have SQL Server in the cloud? Well, the problem is there is a cost to that. It's not necessarily a huge cost, but there is a cost. And the Developer Edition that we are downloading, there is no cost. Now, there is this SQL Server on-premises. So this is the paid-for version. And then we've got the free specialized editions. We've got the Developer, that's the one that we're downloading now, and the Express. So the Express is fine if you want to do select statements and some database administration. It's totally free, including for production. However, it is a cut-down version. The Developer Edition is a full-featured free edition. So the only restriction is you cannot use it in a production environment. If you want to do that, then you will need to actually buy it. So what are these paid-for versions? Well, we've got the Enterprise, the Standard, and the Web. So if we have a look at these, you'll see that the Enterprise is the premium offering, delivering comprehensive, high-end data center capabilities with a price to match. The Standard version offers basic database management. However, there are some features that are missing. So look at the Developer Edition. This includes all of the functionality of the Enterprise Edition. So why do people go for the Enterprise Edition and not the Developer Edition? It's because the Enterprise Edition is licensed for production. The Developer is not licensed for production. So if you want to learn SQL Server, then it is this development and test system that you will be using, and it allows you access to all of the various strands of SQL Server. So in other words, reporting services, integration services, analysis services, as well as creating queries using the select statements and database administration. You can see that the Enterprise Edition is the best version for developers and hobbyists building client applications. It's a very quick install, but you can't expand, you can't build on it if you want to go to the other realms of SSRS, SSIS, and SSAS. Now, the Developer Edition used to be a paid-for version. It was a box product right up to the 2014 edition. It sold for around $200, and I bought one at around that price, and it was a very good value. But now it's completely free, and therefore, if you want to learn how to use SQL Server on your own computer, it is the perfect edition for you. Now, it's called SQL Server. So does that mean you need a server to install it on? And the answer is no. In fact, the hardware requirements are fairly basic. All it requires is a minimum of 6 gigabytes of available hard disk space. Yeah, right. I don't believe that. It only requires a gigabyte of memory. Well, it would function, let's put it this way. But you can see that these are really small requirements. So the big requirement is it needs a 64-bit processor. Now, if you don't know whether your computer has got a 64-bit processor, then open up Windows Explorer, go to Computer or My Computer. So in this case, this PC, right-click on it, go to Properties, and you'll get a new dialog box, and somewhere on there, it will talk about a 32-bit or a 64-bit operating system. If you've got a 32-bit operating system, then the latest version that you would be able to use is the 2014 version, and there is a 2014 Developer Edition available. However, it is not easily findable. It isn't on the SQL Server Downloads page. There is a Products button that gives you access to some previous versions, but not, unfortunately, the 2014 version. So if you do want that edition, then you should Google download SQL Server 2014 Developer Edition. Here you can see an article about it, and there is a link there for Visual Studio Dev Essential members, and that's a free membership. If you click on that, then you will get to this webpage, which searches for SQL Server 2016, but just change that to 2014, and you can then download the Service Pack free version from there. So on my 64-bit operating system, my SQL Server 2022 is still downloading, so I'm going to finish it downloading. So I'll pause the video here, and in the next part of the video, we'll start with the installation. Right, well, we can see that the download was successful. Now, if you wanted a custom install, then you will have the SQL Server Installation Center already running. If not, you will probably find that there are two files that have been downloaded, an exe and a box, B-O-X, and you should run the exe, and it will then ask, do you want to allow changes that you've made? And you say yes, and that will then extract it into a folder, and you can then open up the SQL Server 2022 Developer Installation Center. Now, there's a lot of hyperlinks here. Don't worry about them. You don't need to know much, if anything, about them at the moment. It's the installation we're going for. So on the left-hand side, I'm going to click on Installation. And at the top, we've got New SQL Server Standalone Installation, or add features to an existing installation. So I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to minimize everything else. So the computer then starts preparing for the installation process. So the first thing that it asks is, what version of SQL Server do you want? Do you want the Developer Edition? Do you want the Express Edition? Or do you want a 180-day trial if you're going for the Standard or Enterprise Edition? Or have you got a product key? Or are you doing this through the cloud, Microsoft Azure? Well, I'm going to install the Developer Edition. So let's click Next. So next we go to the second item on our list, and this list may increase as we continue. So the license agreement. So you should have a read of this. And if you agree with the license terms and the privacy statement, then check that box and we go to next. Now it's just making sure that your computer has got everything that it needs. Now you may find Windows Firewall, there is a warning. Don't worry about it. It's just a standard warning. So let's click next. And now we get into the Azure extension for SQL Server. So this is useful if you want to enable Microsoft Defender for Cloud, Purview, and Azure Active Directory to use this particular instance of SQL Server. So in other words, if you want your SQL Server to be protected from the cloud. Well, I'm not going to do that, so I'm going to uncheck Azure extension for SQL Server. So that's all you need to do and click next. Next is going to ask you, okay, what features do you want? Now there is a big list here, and if this is your first time, don't worry, you can always come back to this and add additional things later. If what you are looking for is to build your select statements or to do some database administration, then I would check the database engine services and then just leave it at that. If you're looking for SQL Server Analysis Services, SSAS, then you should check this. Notice each time I do, this list gets just a little bit longer. If you're looking for SSIS, Integration Services, then check this. And if you're looking for any of these additional features, then check that as well. Now, if you're looking for SSRS, SQL Server Reporting Services, it is not actually here. You can click on it, download it from the web, and you'll see that it comes to this page. However, this is not needed unless you want to host your own SQL Server Reporting Services reports on your computer. So you can still create them, you can still run them, you can still print them, everything apart from hosting them without this. So if that's all you want to do, then you do not need to click on this link. Now, I used to say you could select all, but that was in the days when we didn't have such a long list. Now, one more thing, if you have got a small C drive, so you might have a small but very fast drive, then you might want to change the instance root directory at this stage. And there are a few other places where you may wish to change it as well. So for the purposes of this YouTube video, I'm going to assume that you do want access to SSAS and SSIS as well as the database engine services. So I am going to check those two. And then we click next. So now it's just going to have a look and make sure that everything's fine. Next, it's going to ask you for whether you want a default instance or a named instance. Now, if this is your first time installing SQL Server, then you should use the default instance. It's the first instance that anyone will try to connect to, and it's the easiest to connect to. If not, if you have other versions of SQL Server on your computer, then you need to use a named instance. So why might you want more than one SQL Server on the same machine? Well, let's say you're installing SSAS in the two different modes that we've got, the MDX, Multi-Dimensional Expressions mode, and in the Tabular mode. These require different instances. They can't sit on the same instance. So for this video, because I have previously got an instance, I'm going to create a new one. So I'm going to call this MS SQL Server 2022. So let's do that and click next. However, you should use the default instance if that is available. The next tab is for the service accounts. So you should leave everything here as is unless you've got a particular reason for changing them. So let's go to next. Next, what is your authentication mode? How are you going to log in to SQL Server 2022? So the default is the Windows authentication mode. So that uses the same Windows account as you are logged into right now. So if somebody else accesses SQL Server, then they will use their Windows. Now, suppose you can't do that. Suppose you need to use a username and password, then you can use the mixed mode, and you should enter a password for the system administrator, the SA account. But for now, I'm going to leave it on Windows authentication mode. But I'm not going to click next immediately. Very important. I'm going to add me, the current user, as an administrator. Administrators have all the power that you need in your instance. Now, if your C drive is a bit on the small side, then you may wish to go into data directories and change these directories again. So I'm now going to just click next and go into the SSAS configuration. Now, there are two different modes. There is the multidimensional mode. So this is the mode where you can create huge cubes using billions or trillions of rows. They're used by huge companies. If you don't want that, then the tabular mode was created in 2012. So it depends. Are you wanting to use MDX expressions to create and then query a cube? Or are you wanting to use the DAX language and create your analyses in something that's a bit more recent? Now, if you don't want any of these, then in the earlier section, you shouldn't select SSAS. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to select multidimensional mode, and I'm going to click on Add Current User. And again, you can go into the data directories and change it if you don't want everything linked to your C drive. So there is no additional configuration required for the SSIS. It is now ready to install. And to install, you just click the Install button. And you can leave it now installing for the next few minutes. Now, while it's installing, I'd like to talk about a few different editions. So I've talked about one type of edition. Are you getting the Express, the Developer, the Standard, or the Enterprise edition? In addition to this, every couple of years or so, Microsoft comes out with a new version. So we started off with SQL Server 2000. That's the first of the year-named versions. And then 2000, 2005, and then 2008. Now, you might think the next one's going to be 2010, but it was actually called 2008 Release 2 or R2. But it was released in 2010. And then we have 2012, 2014, 2016, 2017, 2019, and now 2022. So you can imagine the next version will come out in 2024, 2025. Now, SQL Server costs a huge amount of money if you're talking about the Standard or the Enterprise edition. And this is one big reason why you might find big companies are using older versions. Yes, there are improvements in each version, but they might not be sufficient for someone who is wanting to spend or not wanting to spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to upgrade. And then there is a big hassle factor when upgrading. So for us who are just using SQL Server to understand how to create our select statements, do database administration, or learn SSRS, SSIS, or SSAS, it's very easy just to uninstall a previous version and install a new version. You haven't got people relying on a particular version, relying on all the data that's there. So if you're going into work and going to be using SQL Server, you might find you don't have the very latest version of SQL Server, and that's absolutely fine. And in fact, a lot of people, even if they were going for the latest version at work, wouldn't buy it until the first big service pack has been released. So basically, if you're using SQL Server on your home computer, then you should get the latest one, in this case, the 2022 version. If you are creating t-sql select statements, for instance, there have been some improvements in the 2012 version, some very important improvements, but after that, there have been more minimal improvements until you get at least to the intermediate level of creating select statements. So if you've already got 2012, 2014, 2016, 2017, 2019, then you're probably fine. If not, then you should install SQL Server 2022. So this is how you can install SQL Server if you haven't got one, and you can see while I've been talking, it has installed. In the next part of this video, we'll install the front end. So we've installed the back end. This is the thing that runs in the background. So next, we'll install the front end for SQL Server. So now SQL Server has been installed on your computer. So let's go back to the SQL Server Installation Center and installation. Now, the next thing we need to install is a front engine. In other words, a program that you can use to create select statements and for database management. And it's called SQL Server Management Studio. So I'm going to click on Install SQL Server Management Tools, and it takes me to this web page, Download SQL Server Management Studio. So I'm going to scroll down and click on Download SQL Server Management Studio. Now, the current version at the time of recording is 20.1, and this is the latest generally available or GA version. So I would suggest whatever the latest GA version is, you install it. I would not recommend installing preview versions. So I'm just going to click on that and it's going to start downloading. Now, if you want for some reason a previous version, then you can scroll down and we've got a link to previous SSMS releases, say version 19.3. Now, you can only have one version of SSMS 20 installed at any one time. So if you've got version 20.2 and you install 20.4, then the 20.2 version gets upgraded. However, you can have SSMS 20, SSMS 19, and SSMS 18 all installed if you want to do so. So my version of SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS, is now downloading, so I'm going to pause the video until it's fully downloaded. So now you can see that SSMS has now fully downloaded, so I'm going to click on Open File. Now you should ensure that you have good virus protection before installing any program. Now this is the location where SSMS is going to be installed. If that's not suitable for you, for example, if you've got a small C drive, then click Change to change it. Otherwise, click Install. So I have a question, do you want to allow this app to make changes to your device? Well, I'm going to say yes. And now it's going to install, and it's going to be a fairly smooth install. So I'm going to speed up the video while it installs. So now you can see that SQL Server Management Studio has now successfully installed. So I'll close that and I'll go to my Start menu and I'll type in SSMS. And here you can see my version 20 and you can also see my previous versions. So I'm going to click on SSMS and open it. Now the first question it's going to ask me is, what instance of SQL Server, the back end, are you connecting to? So if you're connecting to your default instance, then you could just type in a dot in server name or the word localhost without a space. Alternatively, you could click on Browse for more and then find a connection within the database engine. Or you might be at work and you might have been given a server name. So I'm just going to enter a dot and click Connect. However, there will be a problem. In SQL Server version 20, you will probably get this error message. The certificate chain was issued by an authority that is not trusted. Well, the solution for this is to check Trust Server Certificate or to change encryption from mandatory to optional. So whichever you do, click Connect and you should now be connected. You won't get that problem with SSMS 19 or below. The reason we get this problem is because in SSMS 20, this encryption setting changed from no or optional to yes or mandatory. So the two solutions are either change the encryption to optional or to check Trust Server Certificate. If you're connecting to a production environment, so a system at work, then it should have its own certificate already installed, and therefore you shouldn't have any problems if you are connecting to it if you are using the default settings. So in these videos, we have installed the back engine, SQL Server 2022, and we've also installed SQL Server Management Studio, this front engine. So now we've installed SSMS and SQL Server. Where do you go from here? Well, if you'd like to learn SQL Server, then I hope you will have a look at my Udemy videos. In these courses, I take you through various aspects of SQL Server. So if you want to learn how to query SQL Server, then I've got a range of courses depending on whether you have got around 1 hour, around 9 hours, or 29 hours to really get in depth. If you're looking for database administration, then please join me in my DBA course. If you are looking for SSAS, SSIS, or SSRS, then I have got courses on these as well. So you can learn how to use SSRS reporting services, either version of SSAS, so whether you're looking for the multidimensional MDX version or the tabular version, and SSIS. Additionally, I've got a more advanced course for administering SQL on the cloud in Azure. Links to all of these courses are included in the description to this video. Additionally, if you want to learn SSRS, SSAS, or SSIS and use it on your computer, then you will need an additional program. You will need Visual Studio 2022 Community Edition. Again, this is free. And then you will need to install the appropriate extension. So I have additional videos on my YouTube channel for how to do this for SSRS, SSAS, or SSIS. So if you want those, I hope you will look at the playlist, which hopefully is on the screen now, and click to get to your next video. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then please click the like button. And why not subscribe and click that bell next to it? That way you'll be notified of any new videos. I'm Philip Burton of idodata.com. Thank you very much for watching this, and keep learning.